And greetings, everyone. We're so happy to have each of you with us. And let us all mute our mics as we continue to move forward with this roundtable discussion. I see each of you have come to arrive, and we're very happy to see all of you. Let's mute the mic for Chantel as well. Great. Okay, we've made it. So it's been a long time coming, and we certainly hope that all of you are keeping well. And as we move forward on this roundtable discussion, audience, we'll be going through a series of different questions and expressions, and we want all of you to be able to have an open sense of understanding that with GatherVerse, we're not just geared and aimed for products, but we're also geared to understand how these products and how these modern innovations may impact humanity, and as it's been expressed already in the opening, that which is to come. Panelists, we have a number of different questions to go over. There will be things on topic and off topic, if you will. But for now, I'd like for you to be able to express who you are, what you do, and what inspired you to be with us today. We'll begin with the one that's next to me, Chantel. Welcome.
Thank you, Christopher. Good to be here. My name is Chantel. I run a business called Phoenix. So best you know, I'm going to put you through the fire. Effectively, what I do is I facilitate transformation by building integrity from the inside out. And I do this through three keys: curiosity, to know what the things that are holding you back, that are inside you, your belief systems; courage, to step into the new version of yourself; and confidence, to live as a whole person with integrity. Now, I don't come from a tech background, but I love being part of these things, because if we're whole people, we can show up as our fullest version of ourselves. And when that happens, we can harness the tech and the opportunities that are there for us. So excited to be here. Thank you, Christopher.
Chantel, we greet you once again. We're very excited to have you here. Thank you. Grant, please.
Thank you. I am Grant McGaw, CEO of 5-Star BDM. That's for Business Development Marketing, or Brand Development Master, depending on what side of the ball you might be on as we engage. I'm also the host of the Follow Brand podcast, that is a worldwide show that showcases personal branding and business development throughout the world. I am here to showcase the African continent and what it is doing at an unprecedented level, and to change the narrative in the Western culture about the African world and what it brings to the table for present modern mankind.
Thank you so much, Grant. We're very happy to have you once again, sir. Allison, please.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Allison. I'm a founder and GP of Emerging VC EcoScore. And why I'm here is because I am such an ally of the continent of Africa, having worked there for over 7 years in West and East Africa. I really understand the challenges and the opportunity that exists in the region. Our thesis at EcoScore is to support the new global, they're not new, but newly identified global majority, which is underrepresented founders. And we are here to demonstrate that underrepresented founders have a place within the VC system, and they have a place in the startup ecosystem, and they deserve the funding that is there for them to take. So thank you so much for the invite to be on here, and really looking forward to the discussion.
I suspect there's a lot that we'll be able to cover, Allison, and especially based on what you just said when it comes to funding in particular and the narrative of Prosperous Africa. We greet you. Thank you, Allison. Salvation, please.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm happy to be here. My name is Salvation Chigaraka, and I'm an operations and product manager at Each Block. What I do is basically helping founders in Africa to launch their MVPs in market. And I've been doing that for a couple of years now, helping founders who have great ideas, innovative ideas, launch their markets, their products to market. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Christopher.
Salvation, we're so happy to have you here for the first time. And Effie, your mic, please.
Hi, Christopher. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Efionan. I'm a Google Women Tech Makers ambassador, and I'm also an innovator. My role in my role as a product designer, I have had experience. I have had experience in working on a lot of African problems. And through my lived experience, I believe that I'll be able to add to this conversation. I look forward to being a part of this and hearing what everyone else has. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Effie. We're very happy to have you with us once again. Panel, shall we begin? So, I sit here and ask myself, the narrative of prosperity, what might that look like? Where might that come from when we start thinking about the scale of operation? Around the world, we're seeing a tremendous amount of capital and resources being applied to this great juggernaut of artificial intelligence. And we know that at some point, the workforce will be tremendously and rather incredibly disrupted, as we're already to see glimmers of this happening now, where humanity in a lot of ways is not only contending with one another naturally and competing when it comes to technical disruption, but we're also seeing it when it comes to now the competition when it comes to artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is that this machine species, or the way that humans use these models, are in such a way fashioned when it comes to business and enterprise and startup culture that we're able to see startups amass wealth overnight. In fact, and what we're seeing in particular here in Silicon Valley and echoed throughout the world, we'll be seeing more millionaires formed than we've ever seen in our lifetime and may ever see again. I think about this, and I think about what will happen when it comes to the great development of scale of wealth and what is being sacrificed for such. Salvation, I'm coming to you first when it comes to this question. When it comes to technical understanding and when it comes to artificial intelligence, and you're seeing this in the great country of Nigeria, what are you seeing as a whole? Your mic, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. So far, looking at how Africa has been going, it's good to see that we have been embracing the digital economy and leveraging on technology. But then there are also things that Africans need to focus on, which is, from my perspective, working with founders and then coming to the builder ecosystem and then the market. Africa it's actually pushing for the global stage, and that global stage will need support, which is where Africans will need to bring in their focus on in helping to build the African culture of growth in terms of innovation. And then, speaking of a prosperous Africa beyond economic growth, I also believe that beyond the resources we believe leveraging on in Africa, we can also focus our attention to the healthcare system where we've been lacking. We're also focusing good education, quality education, where we also should be seeing progress and prosperity in Africa as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Salvation. I sit here and think and ask myself, Allison, when we talk about these things of innovation, in order for a technology ecosystem to be able to start, it needs fuel of two things. It certainly needs education, but it also needs capital. And this is something that we know that many places around the world, and that including the continent of Africa, severely lacks when it comes to other different technological ecosystems around the world that have found themselves with the immensity of the type of wealth and resource and access. How do we bridge these gaps, Allison?
That's a $1 million question just in itself, and not one that's easy to answer. But I think that, historically, if you look at how venture capital works and historically how funds have been transferred, it's 98% of all historic VC funding or LP funding into VCs has gone to the same traditional VC models, so all the big names. And what does that tell me as an emerging VC? It tells me that those large VCs that are the Sequoias, the Y Combinators, the Andersons, they invest in people that are like them. They have a thesis and they just stick to that thesis. And what does that mean? That means that everyone else only has 2% of that money to go all around the globe, to go to Asia, to go to Africa, to go to Australasia, to go to Europe. And so that is absolutely bonkers. So I think that, first of all, when you're looking at it on a global stage, you really need the investors, and the way that funding works really needs to change. We need to be looking at a new way of funding, and for philanthropy to play a bigger role, and for there to be a level of understanding of what these regions are. If you look at the population of Nigeria, for example, just because you mentioned it earlier, that's over just nearly 250 million people. If you look at the US, it's almost 350 million people. So Nigeria is in itself a massive market. And to be successful and to be a unicorn, you don't necessarily need to go out of Nigeria. And that's where the complexity comes from. It's a PR and marketing. It comes down to that. And
sure,
when these companies that are to grow and to be incredibly successful don't need to necessarily leave their borders. And now Nigeria is a unique example. But there are levels of complexity in Africa as well. But when you don't necessarily need to leave the continent, it's very hard to attract those large US investors. And it is about self-promotion. It is about marketing and the exposure that they need to get. And that is one of the biggest challenges. Now, having said that, how do you get the money in? And I think there is a shift, certainly within the UK and the London markets, and within Europe. There's a lot more discussion around underrepresented founders, a lot more discussion about showcasing specific African-focused events, showcasing Europe as a place where African companies can make the move into Europe as part of their expansion plan. And it's in doing it in this way, and vice versa, for European and UK companies to move into Africa as part of their expansion plan, that raises the bar. It raises that and it opens that door. It opens the door to all the funding that is there, both from a government perspective, from a private perspective, and from the VC perspective. So I think that the tides are changing. There's a lot more awareness and there's a lot more openness, but I think that it really comes down to promotion, trust, and marketing of yourself as founder and of your business.
That's a perfect segue. And thank you for sharing that, Allison. Grant, I'm coming to you now. Chantal, we're coming to you right around the corner at Figure After. When I think about this, the opportunity that Africa has, and I see what's happening with those that are able to vibe code, meaning audience, to be able to expressly build your own platforms in a very accelerated way using these agentic systems of AI, these non-deterministic systems, to be able to build platforms in such a lightning and rapid succession, unlike anything we've ever seen before when it comes to acceleration. We have never moved this fast before here in Silicon Valley. And my point in saying this, and going back to what you're expressing, Allison, there's a few school of thoughts that I have. One, I would like for Africa to one day be in a position, which I think is grounded in reality, to where it can start funding Silicon Valley. Hear me out. There's all these different people in Nigeria alone, from Kenya to Senegal, all the way from South Africa to Cape and to Joburg, and all these other places of Rwanda and Uganda and all these other locations, Zimbabwe and Lesotho. I believe that Africa has so many people, so many resources that are being pillaged by other different continents, but that's a whole different narrative and a whole different summit. But I believe that Africa has so much to contribute with so many humans humans and hearts that it can one day find itself in such a prosperous situation in and of itself, with the global ecosystem to be able to deal and to be able to have buy, sell, and trade ecosystems right within its continent, that it can amass so much wealth, not just with already the wealth that it has with copper and platinum and palladium and gold and tin, but it can be able to create such a great, incredible atmosphere of technical scale, unlike anything the world has ever seen. It doesn't have to live in fictional stories of Marvel comics to be able to have something that can be actual and true. And so that brings me over to Grant and Allison. You were spot on. Bringing in those that are innovating to show the way to those in the continent on what's present day state of the art, I think is brilliant. But to give them a baton. But Grant, fundamentally, they have to understand brand. They have to understand startup development. They have to understand market, as Allison said. You need to teach and educate those who have the desire to innovate to be able to take it to the next level of step of scale. And I know you know a little something about that.
Absolutely. And everything that we've spoken about today, we're talking about the narrative. What is the current day narrative when people think perception wise of the African continent? We're talking about a very large place in the world. And that perception is normally, or just take a look at yourself, isn't in a dark, skewed way. You're not seeing reality. You're operating out of a perception that is an outcropping of colonialism over the last, let's just say, 500 years. That narrative still rules today. What Allison just stated, if you're only getting 2% of VC money that's floating in world capital, that's ridiculous. So that tells you that narrative and that block is still present and operating in the financial sense, which is the lifeblood of the world economy. So you're constricting it. And so when you look at Africa, you look at it almost from that lens as a supplier and not a producer, not as a creator. However, it is leading the reality of that brand, as you just talked about, is that Africa right now is not waiting for permission to innovate. They've already proven major models in mobile money. Think about that. They are the leaders in cryptocurrencies from a government perspective to a consumer perspective in the world. In the world, they are leading in the world of clean energy adoption. They are leading in the world of telehealth. I was at a HIMSS conference. If you're not familiar with HIMSS, that's the Health Informatics System Society, 100,000 members worldwide. One of the showcase innovations that they had was on drone technology, where they're actually utilizing drones to get medication out to these remote areas. They've been doing this for a number of years. They were the first to use mobile technology for cryptocurrency at scale than anyone else in the world because of what they have in place today. They are not behind. They are ahead in many, many different ways. Now, as the landscape not only shifts, to your point, Christopher, technologically, but it is shifting financially. The rapid change from traditional banking systems to cryptocurrencies is huge. This is an open window for a change in narrative and a change of perspective, because money is a representation of value. Where is that value? I look and point even in South America, where you have a small company called, or country called Guyana. That's Guyana. The discovery of oil, the discovery of gold there is a game changer for the Caribbean market. This is happening not only there, but also in the African world. So now, instead of operating on legacy systems that have been in place for a number of years, you operate on new systems. You don't have to go back and operate on older archaic systems. You can get to the newness now. Africa is on this cusp, but the narrative in the mind of the people of the world has to change. They need to see Africa for what it is today, present time. I operate out of what I call the BRAVE framework, because you have to be brave in order to get your message told. You've got to be bold, you've got to be resilient, you've got to be authentic, you've got to have a vision, and you have to execute every day, because the powers that be are very serious about holding on to power. But if you have as they say, he who has the gold makes the rules. There is plenty of gold in Africa, and I will leave it right there.
Thank you, Grant, for expressing that. Chantel, let's remove for a moment, and I agree, there's plenty of gold. Let's remove the gold. Let's remove the tech. Let's get to the human essence of this. Let's talk about the psychology needed, because without this, without having the desire, without having a sense of unity and community with something that you're innovating for, who you innovate for, what you innovate for, beyond money, beyond material. Sure, these things are needed in many ways to sustain, right? But to sustain what and for whom? We start talking about this deep narrative of when it comes inside. My question to you is, what does this mean, Chantel? What does the mind think that we must enter into going into these technological prosperative ecosystems so that we can not only sustain, but we can scale and survive and not leave anyone behind?
Christopher, you know me well. You've steered the conversation in the direction of we are people first and then we are our jobs. Identity, right? Now, I'm an African. I was born on the African continent. I've lived on the African continent for the last nearly 50 years. And I think there's a mindset in Africa, the mindset, or the prevailing mindset, has always been that we need a bailout, or we need help from the superpowers in the world. We need funding. We need the support. So what is this creating in Africa? This mindset, right? What we've got to do, we talk a lot about education, and we talk about capital, and we talk about skills development and all of these things. And there's nothing wrong with all of those things. But you can educate people to a point. You can throw money at people to a point. If the mindset doesn't shift, we are going to squander the resources that are given to us. We are going to squander the education that is given to us. We have to build our people up from a personal development perspective. We've got to start building whole people. And again, we come from a collective consciousness where Africa is the repressed, Africa is the war continent, Africa is slavery. This is the collective mindset that we've kind of carried with us. We've got to start changing that mindset. Grant spoke about the narrative. This is a story that we have told ourselves, and it is time to tell ourselves a story that we can fund Silicon Valley, but it starts with the individual. And one of my biggest bugbears in the work that I do is that it's really, really easy to secure funding for skills, for education, for capital, for investment. But the minute you put a funding proposal in for personal development, people go, yeah, personal development, But without investing in ourselves, how can those founders take things forward? And we have got amazing people in Africa, but we've got to shift the mindsets.
I agree wholeheartedly. I have had the pleasure of knowing so many people from the continent. I know, and when it comes to the ancestry of my nativity, it comes from that continent. But with all the people that I know and all the people that I met and all the business that I do on the continent and the people that I care for, I realize every day I know nothing about the continent, because there's so many different diverse cultures that are there. There's so many different forms of representation, so many tribal considerations, so many advances in business. And make no mistake that Africa is the most advanced continent on earth when it comes to fintech technologies. I think they have such an incredible cumulative wealth of information when it comes to financial distribution and deployment. But Effie, I want to hone in on Kenya. I want to look at that ecosystem, Effie, to help me understand what's the current state of prosperity when it comes to Kenya. I see such a despair with so many reports that I hear when it comes to the different people of this beautiful country, this land, and the opportunities that are lacking but the opportunities that they seek and that they want, quite capable as well. What are you seeing there, Effie? Can you share that with us briefly, please?
So, thank you for the question. So, in my experience, I'd say as an innovator, I believe that innovators are the ones who are driving the country forward. We have a huge youth population, more than any other. For the first time in history, in Kenya, we've had a lot of youth. So this means that youth are the future of the country. And as such, youth are supposed to be helped to innovate and to succeed so that we can all progress as a country. What I'm seeing is trends where it's very hard for youth to get funding. It's very hard for youth to get opportunities. And in Kenya, as well as other African countries, we have situations where people have learned to innovate because they didn't have any other choice. Take an example of M-Pesa. M-Pesa is the biggest fintech company in Africa. And M-Pesa started out through innovation because it started out through necessity because people didn't have a way to send money back home to their parents, people who live in urban areas. And just like that, the idea of M-Pesa came. So Kenya has the potential of um, of innovating and
And
solving problems. in
Effie,
such
let me ask you the M-Pesa versus the shilling. Are you seeing more people use M-Pesa more than the shilling?
Yes, M-Pesa is currently expanding to other countries, and I believe that with time and with enough innovation, it will be able to expand to other places. So yes, I see more people using M-Pesa than the shilling. Yeah.
You know what's so impressive about this, Epi, and please, I want you to continue this. And audience, when you think about it, when we talk about the aspirations of fintech, many people have talked about being able to create different type of currencies that are moving away from fiat, if you will, and thinking about crypto assets and altcoins and meme coins, if you will. But what the continent has done quite successfully is that they're using currency in ways that we've never seen used before ecologically. Most places around the world cannot say that when it comes to the cumulative of society that uses this form of currency in exchange. What does this mean about what we think about dollars and cents? Please, Effie, continue talking about the things that are needed when it comes to technical scale and the opportunity that not only the continent needs, but the great country of Kenya as well. And Salvation, we're coming into you next.
Yeah. So my belief is that Kenya has the potential to innovate in really creative ways, and that the youth should be given these opportunities. So, as youth, it's very hard to get funding, it's very hard to get opportunities. And this has to change if we're ever going to have a prosperous Africa. To me, prosperity is it's not just the economy, it's having a place where everyone can live comfortably, everyone can get access to education, healthcare, and most of the other basic services. And for this to happen, we need to give the youth a chance to innovate. We need to give the youth a chance to experiment. So that's why it's really important for Kenya to focus on youth innovation. And we've seen youth innovate in different ways, even in the absence of funding, even in the absence of money. You see youth doing something very crazy with little to no funding, and it actually working in the continent. So it would make a lot of sense to prioritize youth innovation and to use models that are fit for Africa, because innovation in Africa is a different ball game. Something that happens, things that work elsewhere in the world due to the unique conditions of Africa and let's say Kenya, these things do not work in Kenya. So innovation is very different and it's very unique in this part of the world. So that's why we need to take this into account. Back to you, Christopher.
Thank you so much, Effie. I really appreciate that sentiment. I find it so powerful and so many things that even Chantel and everyone else has touched on as well. Salvation. I think about this here in Silicon Valley. Most people innovate for opportunity. But when you bring the narrative of innovating to survive, as if you have nothing else left, with your back against the wall and you say, I have a little bit of broadband, I have a little bit of Wi-Fi, I have a little bit of code, and now I have this resource called artificial intelligence in my hand. I don't have to go buy it off the shelf. I don't have to wonder if it will be deployed and distributed like an XR headset. It's here, it's with me, and I can build. And so that's more than just a dollar and a dream. But to think that our young people, as Effie just expressed, that are the ones that can lead and are leading innovatively the opportunity to survive, just to survive, a roof over the head, food in the belly, nurturement, salvation. I think about the ubiquity and the abundance of all the minds in Nigeria, so many different people, so many different innovators. What is the barrier, the common barrier to entry that you see, Salvation? And what do you believe that can be done to be able to alleviate, mitigate the gap so that we can hyperscale forward collectively? And we can start, us can start to benefit and to be recipients of the incredible technological innovation that the continent, in particular Nigeria, has to offer. Okay, so we're happy to have her back. She probably clicked the wrong button. Allison, could you take that? Because what I want to do is I want to be able to round in further with this idea of being able to have mind exchange, of having a group of people to be able to come to one place. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe it doesn't feel well. Maybe it doesn't seem like the best state for them to be in. But what it is and what it does do, it allows us to be able to lead towards what Effie just expressed when it came to education. But before that, we'll add Salvation back on the stage so that she can answer that. But we're going to hard in on that, Allison, and then we'll be with you in just a moment, Grant.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a great thing that we'll be talking about the innovative side of Africa, Africa needing funding, and the narrative and all that. I will take a bit of what Chantel said about mindset, and then narrow down to it as a barrier to a prosperous Africa. So for me, it's we having the mindset that we are able and capable to be able to have the innovation, have the ability to create the innovation, have the ability to produce the innovation to build a prosperous Africa. So it starts with a mindset. It starts with coming down to the grassroots via the education system, via the health sector system, via the banking system. We're seeing lots of beautiful innovation, the young ones channeling all their abilities into creating innovation. It's beautiful. But then we need to have an individualistic mindset that in Africa, for we Africa to be able to project ourselves to the global perspective we want to aim for, we need to have the mindset to be able to, have break down the barriers. And now speaking of the barriers, we have the political barriers, we have the financial barriers, we have the health barriers, we have the low employment barriers, we have lots of barriers that we can start making a turnaround, channeling solutions to. But then how can we start? We can start by first changing our mindset. When our mindset becomes more individualistic, I have a responsibility to, in my own community, in my own society, be self-aware, be willing to give, be willing to receive. I'm creating a prosperous Africa. I'm creating a unified Africa. And currently here in Nigeria, we have a very high rise of startup founders and all that. It's good that we're channeling our energy to building tech companies like fintech companies and hectare companies. But if we start solving the basic problems, when we come down to the basic problems, bad roads, lack of electricity, lack of quality education, lack of skill acquisition. We have low manufacturing systems here in Nigeria. We need to, come down to the grassroots problem and start having solutions that actually solve those grassroots problems, because they are the most standard problems that make us survive on our day-to-day activities here in Lagos, Nigeria. Say, for example, we have a system where we have said, okay, in the next 5-10 years, we're going to build solutions that would be focused on helping all roads in Nigeria, all roads in Ghana, all roads in Kenya get fixed in the next 10 years. We will see the rise of logistics companies. Innovations in that area would, increase. So the barrier starts with our mindset. The barrier starts with, governance. The barrier starts with making the right policies that will help break down these barriers. So we need independent judicial system that encourage good systems that will help Africa break out of these barriers, that will encourage the innovative youths to be able to build financially and systematically to build these innovations at large. That's my take on that. Thank
I
you.
find that so fascinating. Thank you, Salvation. I've never heard anyone express in such fashion. We certainly doff our hat to what you just said. Don't only give me Wi-Fi, but give me a road to walk on. I find that just so interesting, because when I think about the fundamental foundation, what's needed, and what I've even seen, and what I've been a recipient of great, tremendous benefit here in Silicon Valley, that we've had not only roads to walk on, we've had great advancements in architectural structure. But I think about hacker spaces and maker spaces, the place to build, a place of common structure, a place to be able to hive mind and share and think and make and hack and code, and to be able to build. And if we don't have those essential things, I think about how can you even get started, even if you have the capital and the wealth to be able to do it. If I don't have a road to walk on, if I don't have a structured roof over my head consistently, how can I survive? With the essential things, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and more. Allison, how do we bridge these real deep gaps? What can global society, what can global contribution do? And what is the role and responsibility that the globe has to be able to scale and to be able to help towards the prosperity of others? I really think there's a deeper interlay of a conversation that's needed to be had here, and we're having it right here in GatherVerse. Please, Allison.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm getting all the tough questions.
Yes, you brought this upon yourself with your opening, but please.
No, I loved what Salvation was saying, and I think that it is absolutely spot on. I think, let's take a moment to just think about how amazing the continent of Africa is, right? And a real showcase of this is how they can leapfrog technologies. Look at the phone system, right? You're talking about, having a Starlink and wireless, satellite telecommunications. Africa essentially bypassed the oldie timies of connecting to a landline with your laptop and hearing the thing just so you could download some emails. If you're old, if you're too young, that was the pain that we went through. But Africa never went through that. They leapfrogged essentially landline technology, right? And I think that in itself is justice to how innovative thinking as a continent. And it is a really complex geopolitically,
That's right.
Location, everything. There's so many challenges there. Logistically, getting from one country to another, there aren't necessarily connecting flights. There's so many different currencies, but these challenges are become overcome. But I think that, when you look at what was achieved on the continent when it comes to telecommunications, that is a beacon of hope. And I think that when you look at it and they see globally what is going on and what is working in other countries, they don't need to necessarily iterate. Let the US, let Europe, let Asia iterate, and let Africa innovate and leapfrog onto that. Now, how is that going to happen? I don't believe that all the solutions are going to come from government, right? I think government are there for votes. They're there for a term, and they're there for, in a lot of cases, a popularity contest.
Sure.
Right. And sometimes they don't want to have those the hard conversations. They don't want to have those difficult challenges and negotiations. And that's where private infrastructure needs to come in, right? That's not selling out, but that's just the reality of what it is. And you see this as well in the US and in Europe and in Asia as well, when it comes to, you know, SDGs and climate action. The governments are missing their targets. They're not going to be able to, you know, to achieve what they promised in the Paris Agreement. It's all down to public and private firms to take on that burden. And I see Africa as a little bit the same. Yes, the governments are going to have to make those tough conversations. And I think that changes and demands from the younger populations, like in Kenya, you're starting to see they're demanding change. They're demanding that, you know, the borders open, that there's easier transportation, that there's easier transfer of funds, of money between people. They're demanding solutions from the government, and that enables change. And so I think that, you know, the people of Africa, which is a ridiculous thing to say in itself, because there is no person of Africa. There are so many amazing minds, but it's that collective. And I like to think of it as a collective. And that in itself is a mindset change, because historically it's been so tribal and it's been so cut off. But I think that the younger generation, the new people coming in, the Gen Zs, the alphas that have, you know, maybe a smartphone in their pocket, that maybe see this opportunity, they're demanding change. They're demanding an open-mindedness, which is new and refreshing. And I think that that's what we're going to see drive the change and be the enabler for the future, to make the governments make the accords for then business to come in and drive that change.
But to drive that change, the handoff, the baton grant, let's really look at this in a very focused terrain for a second. Let's lean in together, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that start? Where's the starting line? I mean, I hear what salvation is expressing. Really, what she's really talking about is the attribution of the fundamental construct of the smart city itself. As I sit here and listen, and I think about what Allison is expressing as well, and Chantel will be with you in just a moment, Effie as well. I think about this, and the youth have desire, but I often think about, especially our young people in this world, all they're looking for is a road. Which way do I go? Who will tell me? They cannot find that in the forest. The forest is a vast thing. It's very thick amongst the branches and the brambles, if you will. Where do I begin? And if there is no road, where do I begin to dig?
Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, what you're talking about, what I call, is the point of the spear. Where is it pointed? Meaning right now, fundamentally, there's a vacuum of leadership on the world stage, in a way that if the point of the spear right now is greed, it's fear, and it's scarcity. And this is what's pointed at the African continent, as well as most of the world, when you look at what does leadership look like. Because if leadership does not look like love, it does not look like creativity, it does not look like charity, then the road is very dark and you become bogged down. You have to dig deep. And I go back to what I talked about earlier, to a framework. You've got to be brave. If you've got to make a decision as a people of what you want as an experience, not only for yourself, but for your current generation and your next generations. Africa is the youngest population on the planet, but it's also the most impressionable. And what are we giving as examples of leadership? And what does leadership truly look like? Because what are you leading to? I get on my soapbox with a lot of corporations around the world when all they do is report on their P&L and their profits. If that is your only goal, if that's all that you stand for, then that's all that you are. Meaning you have no intrinsic value. That's like having a full tank of gas in your car, but you have nowhere to go. You have to have a direction. What is your purpose? And if your purpose is to drive and build a greater economy, if your purpose is to drive and build a greater human experience on this planet, then you have to lead in that fashion. And you have to let go of the past in order to embrace a greater present and future. And this is a call to action for all of us, every single human being on this planet, because you have to look at what is leading your mindset today. What is top of mind for you? What is your purpose every day when you wake up? What are you trying to achieve? You have to look at the point of view, your point of your spear. What are you cutting through? Everyone has some kind of resistance that they're going to come across. You have detailed the resistance that's going across in the African world. It's looking to emerge, no doubt, and it will achieve its goal because it has to grow up and to become what it is meant to be. And I've seen a lot of great innovation that's coming out of and what I say, you're not exporting your oil or your cobalt. It's the talent that Africa has, and its developers, its scientists, its creatives, and it's redefining what global workforce truly looks like. And we've got to move past these survival stories and get into a strategy story that does not constrain innovation. And Africa, I believe, has this proof. I believe that the people on this panel have expressed that it's their culture is currency. Look at Afrobeats, look at Nollywood. These aren't just sideshows. They're leading indicators of Africa's influence on the global market.
Sure.
And this is how we continue to move forward. This is the point of our spirit.
Thank you, Grant. And with that said, Chantel, I want to end this with you. As I said, audience, as quick as it came, as quick as it goes, we have more onward to be able to go forward with these incredible expressions that have been given. Chantel, what is that value mindset that we must have as we move forward into this AI frontier that none of us have been to, none of us have gone, and none of us completely know where we're going at this innovative capacity? What must we carry with us into this forest?
Oh, Christopher, so much to choose from. But I think for me, what brings it all together is taking responsibility. As Africans, and I speak as an African first and foremost, we've got to learn to take responsibility. You know, you spoke when we started this panel about the workforce being disrupted and the rate of change, and we know this is going on, and the innovation. But what's happening on the African continent to a large degree is suddenly the world has opened up and everyone in Africa wants to go global. And as a professional speaker, I serve on the board of some speaking associations, and we're working with a lot of African speakers, and they all got stars in their eyes and they want to become global, right? And this applies to so many industries, but this is sort of my point of reference. It's just so indicative. But every single time we organize an event for them, then they moan about, oh, my internet is so bad, and oh, I live in a noisy area, and oh, I can't put my camera on. And you know what? Stop it. If you want to go global, you have to take responsibility and you have to up your game. And again, to reference Grant, what leadership are we looking at? We're looking at a legacy leadership who haven't taken responsibility, who have squandered wealth, resources, human capital. The change starts with us. We have to take responsibility in our own personal rights. And every single African, this is my call to my fellow brothers and sisters today, to say, no one is coming to save you. You have to be the change that you want to see in the world. That's it. Okay, so I'll climb off that soapbox now.
That was a pretty tall soapbox, but we welcome it here at GatherVerse. Just as we welcome each of you here today at this 2025 GatherVerse Tech for Humanity Summit, first roundtable that is now concluded. Audience, what have you taken with you? What will you do with that which was just said to you with this time that we never get back again? Panel, our gather was well. And for next, we have Lynn and Alexander to talk about the opportunities and to continue forward with what Allison expressed between Europe and Africa. May our gather be well. Thank you.